Is it raining in Tushita?
No, Venerable, not yet. I think it's about to come any moment.
Because look up here, it's all misty and rainy.
Yes, yes, it's about to fall down.
I think I found something really good to keep the internet connection going.
You mean here in Tushita?
No, I bought one.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I would like to,
Yeah.
would love to have, recommend, your suggestion for that.
Yeah. Where are you? I'm in Dharamsala, between Dharamsala and the library. So when I look up, I see the hill, I see the library up there, and then it is all misty. So I think Tushita is much further up there, definitely in the clouds. You think we can start?
I think so, Venerable. I think 90% are here already.
Mm.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. It's not easy to focus the mind every day, coming back for 1.5 hours, going through difficult material, challenging material. That is, you already need a lot of merit in order to be able to do this. I think it's our mind is so easily distracted and so easily finds so many more appealing things to do, and then saying, no, I'm going to go back, I'm going to listen. That is fantastic. So I rejoice in you having the good fortune that you can do that. So we are on day 8 and of discovering your true nature. And yesterday we discussed the nature of mainly anger and attachment and how to apply the antidote. So today we're going to talk about the self. I'm just having a spot on my screen. Yeah. We're going to talk about the self and the nature of the self and how we identify with the self. And having looked into that identification, how we can realize the nature of the self. So I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. But, this is intellectually difficult material. I'm going to try to keep it also as practical as possible so that we can relate to that. And if you don't get something, you get totally lost, put up your hand, let me know somehow. I'll put something in the chat and I'm happy to repeat things. I don't want you to be lost, especially in the beginning, and then thinking, oh my gosh, I missed this whole session because I didn't get it. So just let me know. I'm trying to do as slowly as possible and as simple as possible and as practical as possible for me, right? I'm also very limited in my capacity. Well, let's try. So before we start, we just take a few minutes to settle the mind and to generate a positive motivation and to take refuge. And then we start with the teaching. So close your eyes. And make sure that you sit in a comfortable position, that there is no tension in the mind. Or at least as little as possible. Your shoulders are relaxed, your hands are relaxed. Your eyes are closed, or you can keep them a little bit open. And then bring your mind to your body and to your breath. Just letting the mind rest. Mindfulness rests on the object. If your mind is very distracted today, just notice that. You can name that, and then every time that you notice that your mind is wandering off, you bring it gently back. Without pushing, without punishing, without beating up, just, like a little child that runs away and you just go after it. You take it, bring it back, patiently, lovingly. And then we adjust the motivation. Thinking that we listen to these teachings because we like to develop our capacity to recognize the nature of the mind, which is going to help us to develop our potential for wisdom and compassion, which is going to help us to become fully awake. And we do that so that we can be of greatest benefit to everybody else who is suffering from exactly the same things as we are suffering from, who are longing to be free of that suffering in exactly the same way as we are longing to be free from suffering. And so if we know how to wake up, how to become awake, how to develop our mind fully, then we also have the ability to help each and everyone to do the same thing, to go the same journey. And then connect with your Buddha potential in the middle of your heart. That is your main refuge, your object of refuge. And in that Buddha potential, we go for refuge until enlightenment, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By listening to the teachings and practicing the perfections, may I achieve the state of a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And then we start. The self-grasping mind, and especially our belief, who am I? Even besides the self-grasping mind. We're going to think about that. We're going to talk about that. So in relation to the self, you know, we have delusions arising in the mind, we have qualities arising in the mind, we have a body, we have a mind, we have skills, we have roles, all these things. And when delusions and qualities or qualities arise in the mind, you know, whether that is my anger, whether that is my loving kindness, whether that is my insight, whether that is my jealousy, whatever arises in the mind, if it comes easy, if it comes often, you know, the more we start believing that that is who we are, as if that is an inherent part of us, as if that is something from us that we are born with, and you know, we don't even exactly know where it is seated and what it is, but it is just who we are, right? I'm sure you all have parts of you that you feel that is who I am. And sometimes we might not even be aware, you know, we just have vague feelings and things don't go fantastic, or we have obstacles, or we're not sure what it is, but maybe we are holding on to something that we believe that that is what we are, you know, and so then that belief creates problems again and again and again. So we're going to try to get a little bit of insight into that today. So we can believe when anger arises in the mind quite easily, I'm angry. I'm just an angry person, you know, but now we know that maybe due to your karma, the causes and conditions kept arising again and again and again for anger to arise in the mind. Maybe you had very difficult circumstances. Then anger is, for us deluded beings, the normal reaction to a difficult situation, right? And if you have had many difficult situations, it doesn't mean that you are an angry person. It just means that anger arose often in your mind. And you know, then if you have a mom or a dad who say, you know, you are so angry and we don't like you when you're angry, and go out of the room when you're angry, then it becomes even more like, oh, you know, we get shamed, we feel guilty, we feel unhappy with who we are. We're already suffering when we get angry, but then we feel even more unhappy. And then that all feeds the belief that that is who we are. And you know, we can have that with jealousy, that when that arises a lot. Jealousy, we often hide, right? We know that that is not a pleasant characteristic to show. So we might keep that for ourselves and deeply believe, like, you know, that I know I'm jealous, but I'm trying not to show it. And when I don't show anyone, then nobody knows it's there. But actually, I think that is me. I believe that that is inherent part of me. We also can believe that, you know, when we have low self-esteem, there was a question about what about us low, as Westerners with our low self-esteem, we can't practice humility. We believe that that is who we are. We do not know ourselves without low self-esteem. How can we be without that? How does it work? How do we do that? Right? It's difficult. I know that many struggle for years to really get to that low self-esteem. There can be fear of rejection, you know, and there can be so much more that comes up. And when it comes up very often, or when it colors a lot of our experiences, when it is somewhere in the background, always triggering some way of thinking, you know, we believe that is who I am. So what kinds of the self, or no, I should say, what part of the body and the mind, or what aspects do we identify with? You know, think about yourself. What is it that you feel strongly, that is what I am? And what is that part of? Is that your body? Is that your mind? And if it is your mind, is it your delusions, or is it your good qualities? Or do you have deep-seated beliefs in your mind that you feel they're not really delusions. They, of course, they are delusions, but they have become so ingrained in your thinking that it is like a cluster of delusions that you hold on to, and that looks like, you know, that is like a belief. Some people say, oh no, I'm not my delusions, and I'm also not this, and I'm just an observer. That is my real self. Some people feel my real self is my intuition or my soul. They have a strong identification with that. Sometimes we can identify with our skills. You know, we have a set of skills which are very unique, which are very typical for us. So then we believe that is who I am. You know, I am nothing without my skills. That is actually who makes who I am. This is what is giving me value. Can you identify with something? We can identify with more than one thing, right? Sometimes, you know, superficially, we can identify with things, and then deep inside, where we are with ourselves, deep inside with what we hardly share with others, we can have certain beliefs which are very different from the superficial roles that we have, or the superficial identifications that we have. Right? We don't have to identify with one thing. There can be more things. It can also be with the role that we are playing with our family, within our work. You know, a long time ago, in the time of my mother, being a mother was very important. You know, so the identification with being a mother was, for my mother, almost everything, all she had. So the moment the children leave home, you know, she's lost, because who am I without my children? So when we strongly identify with any of these aspects, and we believe that is who I really am, then we can start shaking that belief a little bit by thinking, who would I be without that? If I take that whole aspect away from me, what is left? And that can have huge implications. So that can be very scary. And it is even more scary when we strongly believe in inherent existence. At the moment, we do not know things without inherent existence. Although, you know, in the mind, we do know that inherent existence doesn't exist. But the moment things come to mind, we hold on to them as being inherently existent. For instance, if I would be inherently existent angry, what that would mean is that my anger is in my mind in every moment, my whole life. There is no, no moment in the mind free of anger. That would mean inherently existent anger. Always there, permanently there, doesn't change, has come about not by any specific causes and conditions. It was there from the beginning, and it's going to stay there till the end. That is inherently existent anger. When we think like that, we say, no, I'm not angry my whole life, you know, but it comes up. And when it comes up, it appears as if it is an inherently existent part of us. It appears as if it is always there, even if we don't notice it. Right? All these periods that we are not angry, we believe the anger is actually there. I just don't see it at that moment. True. That's what I believe. I'm projecting that now on you guys, that you all believe the same, similar things, or that you, but I want to check. You recognize that? No yeses, no nos. Okay. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to take that as we are not sure. Maybe you haven't looked that deeply yet. Or maybe you don't recognize it in that way. But for us, holding on to inherent existence, identifying strongly, it feels almost that if I would take that away, there is nothing left. Inherent existence is like, sometimes I compare it with a kind of a wrap. You have, say, the body and the mind, and then we wrap something around that, and they appear as being the same thing. And so when I believe when there's anger in the mind, and the anger comes quite easily and quite almost looks like naturally, it comes often and it is strong, and I feel strongly like, oh my gosh, there it is again, and I don't like it, and we feel that is me. What we do is we project an inherently existent self on top of the anger that arises in dependence on causes and conditions. And they appear as the same thing. And then we start identifying more and more with the projection of our mind, that inherently existent part, this part. And this one we don't see. We don't see, anger came through causes and conditions. If I change the causes and conditions, then it wouldn't arise so often. If I do this and this and this, it also won't arise so often. So I can change it. And actually I can help myself to generate a mind where anger hardly ever, it hardly ever arises in my mind anymore. I forget about that. I think it is just like that. Right. And then I believe if I would take this one away, what happens in our mind is that both fall away. This one we can't even see. We see them as together, we see them as the same thing. If we say, oh, I'm going to take this one, what I projected, I'm going to take it away, then nothing is left. That's what we are doing. Right? This is why we often keep repeating things. Because we do not know what we are without it. We do not know how to separate that projection of our mind, that inherent existence, and what is actually there. We do not know how to do that. So sometimes you hear from people, they have been for years in a certain profession or role, or, and then there is a change. Voluntarily or not, doesn't matter. There is a change. They go to a different workplace, they're going to do different activities, they're going to get a different role. Sometimes they need a couple of years to, how would I say that? To find themselves again in that new role, Who am I in this new role? Who am I without my old role? There is a transition time. It doesn't go like that. We need to get used to our new self. So we know that we do not always identify with the same thing, right? You can believe that you're angry. You can believe that you are a very good husband. You can believe that you are a loving father. You can believe that you are a loyal employee. You can, all these things, they can all go together. And when we focus on one, it appears like we are just that. But then when we are in a different situation, we can also think in a different way about ourselves. And they are all true. They can all be true at the same time. But we cannot hold all of them in the same time. That's very difficult for the mind. Once we identify with something, it looks like that is who we are in that moment. And in that moment, it appears that we are always like that. And that is who we really are. So there is this appearance of inherent existence. You know what I'm talking about? Hawa has a question. Pema, can you unmute him?
Sure, Venerable.
Thanks, Jamyang. I just wanted to understand a little bit better what you meant by, or if you can explain something you said about even when the anger is not there, you identify with that.
Yeah.
That you still think that that's.
So when you believe that you are an angry person, then even when you're not angry, you believe that in actuality you are an angry person. It is just not there yet, not there in this moment. But if something happens, you're going to be angry. Some people say that's your real nature. Oh, now I see who you really are, you know. Then, and if you say that to a child, and the child believes, oh, that's what I really am. So even when anger is not in the mind, you can still feel deep inside, actually, I'm an angry person, but it is, you know, nobody sees it at the moment because, you know, you might even believe that you are pretending to be loving and kind, but that is not really who you are. Actually, there is, you know, that there is this deep anger inside you, which is not showing up today, but you know that a little thing can just inflame it and then it's there again.
So if you think that you're a loving person, you think you're a compassionate person, and that's who you are, what's the difference?
When you think, well, there's no difference. I think it's the same. When you can also be a loving, you believe you're a loving and compassionate person. And then you come home and your children are naughty and you hit them, right, out of anger. But you still believe you're a compassionate person and a loving person. And you just forget about that, you just hit them. Right? Same. The way we believe in that is, I think, is the same.
So it's not the quality, it's the belief.
It's the belief.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the more the quality arises in the mind, you know, the stronger the belief that we are that can arise from that. But it can be positive qualities that, you know, you can believe I'm such a special person, you know, and you go through your life as, wow, you know, I have all this capacity and blah, blah, blah. And then if the causes and conditions are not there, you actually are totally deluded. I mean, thinking that you're so special is already a delusion, but you get angry and you get upset and you're short-tempered, but you still feel I'm a special person. It's just that people don't understand me. You know, it's just the people who don't get me, that don't see that I'm like that, but I am, right?
So how do you know?
At a certain point, you start to see it and you think, maybe this is not true, you know. So you listen to the teachings and you listen about causes and to teachings on causes and conditions and impermanence, and that, for instance, if you identify with negative qualities, that is not the nature of the mind, and that is not at all who we are in essence as human beings. And then maybe slowly, you know, you get a little bit of courage to think, well, maybe it's not true what I believe about myself. And I'm going to check if it is true. And you're going to check your own beliefs. And then maybe you discover, oh, it's not like that. And then you go a level deeper and then you discover, no, there is also no anger. And then you go, you know, until you have digged it all out and you see, actually, there's nothing there. What people have been pointing to, where I have been pointing to, there is nothing there. That is that. There is nothing there. That is that anger, you know. Then it's gone. That's
Can I ask one more question, if it's okay?
Tell me.
So what do we expect? At the ultimately, what should we expect to be there?
No characteristics of our own. so no characteristics of our own, so the mind can take any shape or form, not shapes and forms, but that's don't take that literally. We can reflect any qualities. Whatever we put the most effort in, that will be the one that will arise most often in the mind. But we can do that on the scale of being very dark and angry to the scale of being very light and loving. All of that is possible. We are inherently not any of these aspects. The more we realize that inherently we are not any of these aspects, the less delusions can arise. The more the loving and compassionate qualities will arise in the mind, and the delusions and the anger and the holding on to, they will become less and less strong, because the delusions arise in dependence on the inherently existent self that believes I am that. The more I can see I'm not any of that, right? I can be this, I can be that, I can be that, I can be that, depending on causes and conditions, depending on the training of my mind. Then the self-grasping mind becomes less strong. And when the self-grasping mind is less strong, delusions cannot arise. When delusions cannot arise, then the positive qualities naturally arise more easy in the mind. The negative qualities, they cannot arise in the mind. They need a self-grasping mind. Right? You get that? It's quite magical. Huh?
So like
that was your question.
Yeah, I'll stop.
It's all right. I mean, I think it is a nice conversation and it's good for everyone. And I don't want to, but I also want to have a look at the questions here, see if there is something that we can clarify more.
Thanks.
Thank you. So true, I realized something similar when I moved away from home. I was very calm and I did not match the long-held belief that why I was an angry child. If we can let go of these beliefs, we transform our whole life. Why is it that we cannot identify with more than one thing, especially given that we live with so many delusions that become a part of us? So we cannot identify with more than one thing at a time. So if I strongly feel now in the moment that I'm a Buddhist nun, then, and I totally believe in that this is real, this is my reality, then that is what is in my mind. Inherently existent Buddhist nun. When that conception of inherent existence is there, it's very difficult to have anything else appearing in the mind. But of course, when the session is finished and I go shopping and, I might have the feeling that I'm more than just a Buddhist nun. It is not that I cannot have more roles in my life. Right? But when we hold strongly onto inherent existence, then when one idea appears in the mind, that idea will just occupy our mind. That's what I think, but I might be wrong. So the question, what am I, what would I be without that, is a very important question to ask. And if you feel like, sometimes we have a role or we have qualities that we feel we really like it and we have a nice relationship with ourselves in that role. Outside of that, we don't have much, So then we also hold strongly onto being that. So who would you be without that? Without that, I don't know, maybe you have a fantastic job where everybody loves you, where everybody admires you, then you come home, your marriage is not that great, you really don't like your kids, but you all take it for granted because you have that role at your job. And then you lose your job. And then your only life is at home. All that part that you didn't like, can be difficult. right? It's like our identification is in another role. And we do not like to identify with what we found ourselves in now. You know? But they say the Bodhisattva, they like to do all activities of samsara. They like to, you know, engage in whatever is needed. So that can be an opportunity to develop different relationships with yourself in roles that you don't like so much. You know, maybe it can become an opportunity to have better relationships with yourself. The more you can see that you are not your roles, that you are not your qualities, that you are not any of that, you know, then we better can, when change is coming, we are more flexible. We can adjust much better. I thought that was quite magic in Australia. You know, I'm coming from Holland, where people have a job. When I was young, you had a job when you were 18 years old, and you would, most of the time you would work there your whole life, right? Then 65, you're finished. Oh, I worked 40 years for the same employer, right? No change, no change. So then when people lose their job, there is huge devastation in the mind. But in Australia, people, they change so easy from one job, you know, then they're the cook, and then they'll become a caregiver, and then they become, you know, they start working in the garden somewhere, and they're very flexible in that. And I really like that, you know, it's like people are not just one thing, they see themselves as they can do many different things. And there is also space in the society for these kind of changes. Right? And you have much less holding on to the self. So are you all with me? I'm going to go a little bit more difficult now. Okay, cool. So what we need to realize is that we are empty of whatever quality, identity we have given to ourselves. What is even more important, that we realize that we are empty of that inherent existence. Not just about the qualities, but also that inherent existence. So when we project qualities on ourselves, then whether they're positive or negative, we believe these qualities are inherently existent, and we project them onto a self that we believe to inherently exist. So we can practice the lack of inherent existence by visualizing that we do not have that quality. Who am I without that quality? And how do I feel, and how do I react? Oh, and I'm still there. And, you know, to see that even if inherent existence isn't there, even if certain roles are not there, that's not the end of life. That is, we are still here, we're still functioning. And maybe it gives us much more freedom to do other things, to be more flexible. And because of that, we feel maybe more easygoing, we feel more relaxed, we feel, you know, happier in ourselves. So when we let go of that grasping at the inherently existent self, that feeling will be 10 times, 100 times bigger. You know, there will be huge freedom when we realize that. So how do we do that? We'll go through the steps of how we realize whether that is the lack of something that we identify with, or whether that is the lack of the inherently existent self. We can use the same steps. All right. So the first step is that we have to identify, what did I add to the self, which is not there. And if I talk about the inherently existent self, the qualities that we add is the quality of inherent existence. So I have to think, what would it mean if the self were to exist inherently? Inherent existence means that there is an autonomous entity, an entity which doesn't depend upon anything. It doesn't depend upon causes and conditions. which means it must have been there from the beginning. It doesn't change. It is permanent by nature, therefore it will last forever. That is inherent existence. And it is unitary, right? We experience oneself. So if we have a very clear image of what that means, that is what I'm projecting. That is coming from my mind, that projection. But what is there in actuality? Right? My body, my mind, they do not function as such an entity. If I look from the side of the body and the mind, my body is changing all the time. My mind is changing all the time. There is no permanence there. Everything is coming and going. What I think about my body depends upon my mind. What I project onto the body, right? So when we know what we impute, that's the first thing, getting that really clear. What we impute, what we project, doesn't exist. It doesn't exist from the side of the object, but if we talk about inherent existence, it doesn't exist at all. It is a non-existent. So it is quite difficult, to get an image of a non-existent in the mind. But we can think, if something were to exist like that, how would it look like? But you never get a real picture as, when you look at a cup or a pot, or that is much easier to make a picture of. So you're making a picture of a non-existent. And then you have to determine that if such a self would exist, a self which is inherently existent, then it must be either exactly the same as my body, as my mind, or it must exist as something different from my body and my mind. Right? Because it is an independent entity, which, there is no coming and going, there is no causes and conditions, there is no relationship in that regard. So if the self exists, it must be either the same or it must be something different. And if it is the same as the body and the mind, it cannot change into something that it is something different from the body and the mind. If we choose it as something different from the body and the mind, it can never be something that is the same as the body and the mind. So we have to generate a conviction that there is no third possibility. It is either this or it is that. Inherently existent, right? We feel, sometimes I feel I'm my body, sometimes I feel I'm my mind, sometimes I feel I'm something different from my body and the mind. When things do not exist inherently, there is no problem in that. But when things exist inherently, that is not possible. Right? So we generate the conviction there are only two possibilities. And then we're going to find reasons why things cannot exist in one way or the other. So the self does not exist inherently with the body and the mind. Because if it would, then, I have a body and a mind, and in Buddhism we talk about I have 5 aggregates. If there would be inherently one, I would have to have 5 selves. If the self would be the same as the aggregates, I would have to have 5 selves. Or if I say, no, I only have one self, then you should have 1 aggregate. Then your body and mind should be exactly the same thing. I cannot have an inherently existent self, which is one thing, which is the same as the aggregates, and then I have many aggregates. With inherent existence, that is impossible. It's already difficult to think about what inherent existence is, isn't it? Our mind knows that it isn't true, but somehow we believe in it. So we have to do a little bit of brain gymnastic to convince our internal beliefs that it really is not like things appear to us and how we hold on to things. If the self would be inherently existent, say it will be one with the body, you could say, well, the self is one with the body. The self is really one with the body. But then we say, I think, or I feel, or, I meditate. These are functions, according to Buddhism, of the mind. They're not of the body. So if you say, I think, how can the self be inherently one with the body? Or if you believe the self is actually inherently one with the mind, actually I am my mind, then how can you say I'm walking? When you say I'm walking, then the I, you identify with your body. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm not sure if I'm clear. And you can tell me. If I would be inherently one with my body or my mind, we couldn't say this is my mind and this is my body. When we say my mind, the self is something different than the mind. When I say my body, my mind is something different from the body. So therefore they cannot be the same as the body. They cannot be the same as the mind. If the self and the body and the mind were one, inherently one, then when the body dies, the self would die as well. And also the mind would die. When somebody dies and we look at the body, we never say that is the person. We say that is the body of the person. Right? A dead body, we see that as something very different from a body that is alive. So that shows that although we hold on to an inherently existent self, the way that life operates, we know that the self doesn't exist inherently. We know that the self changes. We know that the self is not the body. We know that the self is not the mind. We know, on a certain level, we know all that. The way we function, we know all that. But then the way we see it and the way we hold on to that in our mind, somehow we don't know it. So we have a lot of intelligence with us, which is perfectly all right, which is in harmony with how life is. But then when we look at a moment, it's like you make a picture and then we believe that the next moment is the same as the picture. And the next moment also, and the next moment also, we hold on to that picture. That's inherent existence, having a belief about something that we carry into the future, into the past, and believe that it is real. If that inherently existent self were real, then actually that would be a very bad message. That would be a very, for me, depressing message, because then we would have to say, if the inherently existent self is real, if it exists the way it appears to us, then that is just how things are. Then there is no need to do all these difficult classes where we have to think about how we exist. Then there is no need to even think that you can develop your mind. Then there is no need to think that things do not exist in the way they appear to us. Things exist exactly in the way they appear to us. It would be like that. Then nothing is possible. Enlightenment wouldn't be possible. Freedom wouldn't be possible. Then we have to say, this is just samsara. It is as it is. if the self and the body and mind were inherently one, that would be one of the consequences. So can you see they're not, so then you come to the conclusion, they are not inherently one, right? Can you see that? The self and the body and the mind are not inherently one. So then we can check, then are they inherently different? Does the self, the inherently existent self, exist separate from the body and the mind? So if that would be the case, then we would be able to see the self without the body and the mind. We would be able to think about the self without calling to the mind the body and the mind. Now, when we think of a person, first the body appears, and then on top of that, we project the person. But if the self is totally separate from body and mind, we don't need the body and the mind to call to mind the person or the self. Yeah. Right? We don't do that. Do you agree? Okay. So then you have to say that self also doesn't exist. That inherently existent self doesn't exist as a separate entity. So then I had only two options, and I've investigated these options, and this self cannot exist in either way. So therefore, an inherently existent self cannot exist. So it appears to me, but I know that it cannot exist like that. And so then so you train this again and again and again. And then you get more and more conviction in your mind that the things really do not exist the way they appear to you. And then that wisdom will help you that although things appear to you to be inherently existent, you have the wisdom in your mind that you say, but I know it doesn't exist like that. I do not believe my own appearances. So then we see such a self cannot exist. We realize the absence of the self. And so in our mind, it can be that the self that we believe was there disappears. Due to the reasoning consciousness, that self disappears. So we realize the emptiness of such a self. And then what comes to the mind is just a vacuity. It's not that there is anything else. It's not that the self appears in the way it exists. It is nothing. The only thing you can do is say that self that I believe to exist, I can see with my reasoning consciousness that is not there. So I realize the absence of the self. Right? Because that is what you were investigating. Then when you come out of that meditation, then you can say, okay, that self doesn't exist. Then is there a self, and how does that self exist? So when you do, what would I be without that? What would I be without my anger? What would I be without my, my fear of rejection? What would I be without whatever you're holding on to? It can be that you have this feeling of, I cannot think of anything. It's like I just disappear. Right? That is a normal feeling. But don't let that stop you from investigating if what you are believing is really true. Right? And so you need to have the knowledge and that although it appears that that self doesn't exist. Although that self might totally, disappear into space, into nothingness, that doesn't mean that you do not exist. It is just that you cannot imagine what you would be without that. And so then you can start wondering, what would I start doing if I wouldn't have that anymore? What would that mean to my life? And you let your fantasy go. And that might help you to have not so much fear for discovering yourself without certain beliefs. So although the self does not exist in the way it appears to you, we do have a self. The self exists. Although the self does not exist inherently, the self does exist. Our self is not, when the inherent existence is not there, the self can be any part of our body, it can be any part of our mind. For one moment, for 1 hour, again and again. Sometimes, we can identify with each aspect of our body and our mind. And there is no fault in that. That is totally fine. That is totally normal. The problem is that I believe it is really true. Right? So today I'm this, tomorrow I'm that. No problem. I lack inherent existence, so I can manifest as anything. And so the more flexibility we have and the more space we have in the mind to see that we can be everything, the more freedom we feel. Because that self-grasping mind, that believes that we exist inherently, that's like a prison. And in that prison, we repeat things again and again and again, only giving suffering. We believe maybe some happiness comes, but there is only suffering. But when we let go of that prison, there is total freedom and space for change and enjoyment and becoming, living up to your potential, becoming whatever you want. Can you do something with that? I'm going to do a few questions. And if you have a question, please, you can ask. But there were a few questions from yesterday. And Jiten says, what are the aggregates? So the aggregates are just, in Buddhism, we say we have the body and we have the mind. And then in the mind, we have feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. So the body and the mind is divided into 5 aggregates. Is there also a self in the ultimate truth? The ultimate truth is that there is no self. The ultimate truth, in the ultimate truth, there is only emptiness, nothing else. The ultimate truth is emptiness. That emptiness itself doesn't exist ultimately, but it is also empty of inherent existence. When we realize the ultimate truth of the self, we realize that there is no inherently existent self. And what we see is an absence of the self that we believed in. The self is a conventional truth. So within the ultimate truth, you cannot find a conventional truth. And as sentient beings, we cannot see ultimate truth and conventional truth together. So for us, they will always be separate. Only the Buddha can see that, he can see the conventional reality and the ultimate reality at the same time. Does that mean that he sees the self in the ultimate truth? No. The self is still a conventional truth. All right, Carol? Good. I understand there is no inherently existent self, but you say there is still a self. So what is it? Yeah, so tomorrow we're going to talk about what is it? What is it? The self is what we say, what is merely imputed independence on the mind, you know. So tomorrow I will explain. Okay. Tomorrow I want to talk about the dependent arising, then what is there, and then how we relate that to practice that we do during the day. And then I will attach the bodhicitta mind a little bit on that. But I thought, you know, thinking about the nature of the mind is really how to develop that wisdom mind that can see the nature. And although loving kindness and compassion is part of that nature, I prefer to give you some more tools that you can really focus on that nature. And I'm sure you'll get so many teachings on loving kindness and compassion that you can integrate that. That I don't have to, because I would just have to go very quick through the main points, and you have heard that many times. And I think that's not really adding anything. It's you know, I think I can do something which is more helpful and what you don't hear so often. I think, I don't know. So yesterday there was a question, how can we focus on contentment with the way things are, but still have the motivation to improve life for ourselves or others? So contentment is what we are content with, whatever arises, right? That doesn't mean I'm not gonna I'm not gonna do anything. I can have big plans that I wanna, you know, I don't know. I have an idea, I want to help so many sentient beings, I'm going to make this and this project, and, you know, and I can set up the project. Then not much happens. You know, this I have to accept. This I shouldn't fight. But what I can say is like, okay, nothing is happening. I have to accept that. Maybe I can change something. Then I try to change the way I'm going about. Maybe I have more advertising, more publicity, see if that works. You know, nothing happens. I have to accept that as a fact, right? We fight against the facts. We say, no, I don't like that, and I want it to be like that, and we become stubborn, and we keep repeating the done again and again, expecting them to have a different result than before, right? But that is not beneficial. So you do not give up your motivation to help others. You keep doing that. But you, whatever comes back to you, this is what we have to accept. Right? Our problem is that when things happen which are not nice, we cannot accept. And then Sarah says, well, where does depression enter into delusion? I wonder if depression has, I think depression has a lot to do with undigested, unpleasant emotions. You know, with having had a lot of unpleasant experiences where there was no space for grief, being angry, being disappointed, and you all had to swallow it. You know, or it wasn't safe to express it, or whatever reason, and then you have to hold them somewhere in your body. And then at a certain point that will manifest as being depressed. Depression can also be a lack of hormones that create pleasant feelings, right? It can also have physical causes. that you do not have the capacity to produce the physical hormones that give pleasure. So if you suffer from depression, you can also look into that aspect. It is, you don't have enough pleasure, you have too much unpleasantness. And maybe it is a combination of both. Can you do something with that? Sarah? Or you want to know more? Are you okay with that, Sarah?
Thanks for unmuting me. I was just, I guess, yeah, I'm not really, I guess I didn't mean sort of hormonal imbalances or what have you. But, sometimes when you're averse to or don't like a situation, some people may be angry and some people may be sad. So not everyone, when something doesn't work out with attachment or they get something they don't want, is angry.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may accept it and then be sad.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that? Is that a delusion? Is that something else? I mean, it's
well, that's
a
an
different way of
unpleasant
reacting in some people.
That's an unpleasant feeling, right? Sadness is an unpleasant feeling, and you can sit with that unpleasant feeling and let it arise, feel it totally, and then it will dissolve back into the mind and it is gone. I think depression comes in when there is unpleasant feelings and we cannot fully feel them because they are too intense, because they are too sad, because they are too whatever. We cannot totally feel them. Then they start to drag out, because feelings need to totally reach their peak before they can dissolve back into the mind, before they disappear. When we do not let them reach their peak and we can only bear this, then it can take a long time before it dissolves back into the mind. Right? Would you call that depression? Being sad?
Maybe I wasn't precise enough. I just meant a different reaction to not getting what you want as opposed to anger.
Right. Yes. No, you don't necessarily have to become angry. You can become sad. But you have to look at that, I think. If you're just sad, you're sad and then it is gone, But some people, they become sad in a way that they try to get what they want by becoming very sad. Right? I'm so disappointed. That can be kind of an emotional blackmail in order for the other person to give you anyway what you want, for instance. Right? Just feeling the feeling and then letting it go. It's great if you don't become angry and you just feel it. I've heard teaching that depression is the karmic result of sexual misconduct. What do you think about this? I don't know. Can be true, but I've also heard Lama saying that Alzheimer is a result of sexual misconduct. It's so easy to put it on sexual misconduct. We all have done it so many times, and but I don't know. When you say it is a karmic result of sexual misconduct, it is almost like you just have to accept it and you can't do anything about it. That is how it sounds to me, because you disconnect the depression from this life and you put it in some sexual misconduct that you did in past lives. Right? How are you going to heal that? How are you going to recover from that? B, what do we do with that?
Well, I think like any type of karmic result, if we recognize that it is a karmic result, then we do not have an additional layer of frustration or unhappiness about it. Then one can just stay present with the depression as a way to deplete that karmic energy. And also we can be more mindful of our sexual conduct in this life.
But every experience that we have is a result of karma.
Yes, that is true. And
so yes, thinking like that can help to accept, like, well, this has happened, it's some karma, I'm not going to fight it, I'm going to accept it, right? We can apply that to all experiences that we have.
Yes. You see, clinically, one can observe that sometimes depression has a source. Something happened in their life, they are unhappy, and over time it becomes a depression. But there are situations in which you cannot identify the source in this life, the way it happens. Then in Western science, they say that it is because of hormonal imbalance, you are just born with it. I have psychologist friend who have observed 4-year-old depressed and psychotic and all of that. Where does that come from? So just because we say that everything is karmic, but just because we say that something is karmic does not mean that that's what it is. The fact that it is karmic means we can do something about it. I mean, if a tree is grown, it's already grown. We cannot say that the tree, we do not want the tree, but we can then be in the better position to deal with the tree being there. In this case, not adding to the energy of depression or whatever it is. I think in meditation, I hear this often, maybe Venerable, you can confirm that if it's true, that any feelings that comes up, if we just stay present with it, because any feelings that comes out has an energy that comes with it. So if we just stay present with it, then the energy will be spent. And so long as we don't add more to it, over time, it will become less and less. So that if that is true with anger and jealousy and all that, maybe that is true with also depression.
Yes, I think so. But you're saying depression is the karmic result of sexual misconduct. I think depression, it is a negative feeling. It is definitely connected to having harmed others. But if you connect it to sexual misconduct, what I'm saying is like, I don't know, maybe
it's not that I know for sure that's what it is. It's not that I know for sure that's what it is. I'm just throwing it out as.
But I know that people think like this, and I know that some lamas say this. And, if we then adopt a belief, oh, it is like that, and then we see a depressed person and we say, oh, that's coming from sexual misconduct. The person might not be able to identify with that. It might not be true. It might, it's like, I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, I know it's difficult, but generally, generally, it seems that we have no problem accepting that wealth comes from generosity.
Yeah, but depression and sexual if you say you're sexually abused and that is related to sexual misconduct, yes. But this is depression. It's very far away. Relating that to sexual misconduct, no?
Okay. All right.
Anyway.
Okay. I don't know. I was just asking. Okay.
Yes. I never heard it, and but it might be true. I don't know. So I have a little meditation on that. We go through these 4 points of analysis in meditating on the lack of inherent existence. But I just wanted to, there was one more question. Suhas, did I say that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, could you please talk about doubt?
Yes.
And also, if I'm not wrong, you mentioned that putting ourselves down is also a sense of pride.
Yes. What would you like me? So,
could you please elaborate? And how do we navigate any course or charter a path when we are riddled with doubt?
doubt refers, as a delusion, refers to the mind that cannot come up with a decision, that keeps going from shall I do this or shall I do that, that doesn't know which way to go. If that stays a long time in the mind, you do not use your energy to move forward. You stay, in the doubt. In that way, if doubt functions like that, it is seen as a delusion. There are 3 types of doubt. One doubt is that you think, oh, I think it is not true. And so that is doubt away from the fact. So there is something that is the truth, and you say, no, I don't think that is true. And then there is a doubt that is equally, and it says, yeah, I'm not sure if it's true. Sometimes I think it's true, and sometimes I think it's not true. And then there is a doubt towards the fact that says, I think it is true, but I'm not sure. So the doubting mind, what it needs is it needs wisdom in order to know what kind of decision it can make, which kind of, if I'm not sure what is true and what is not true, I need reasons, I need more understanding, I need more information. So if I have doubt and I start looking for more information and then I resolve my doubt, it's no problem, It can be a healthy doubt. But if I have doubt and I do nothing to find more information or nothing that is going to help me to get more information about that topic, the doubt will stay in my mind. Right? So then it becomes an affliction. And then you said, what was the other question?
Putting ourselves down is also a sense of pride.
Putting yourself down, yes, the low self-esteem. So in the Abhidhamma Kosha, there are, I think, 9 types of pride. 8 are related to how we feel superior towards others, and 1 is that we feel inferior towards others. With pride, we are always comparing with others. I'm better than you, I'm worse than you, So in doubt is, pride is an, how do I say that? An inflated ego. The self is inflated. When we have low self-esteem, that self can become huge, right? Comfort in low self-esteem. But we blow up the self. We make much more of the self than it is in actuality. Me being better than others, that self doesn't exist. But me being worse than others, that self also doesn't exist. Both selves are inflated. Can you still hear me? It's raining. The mic a bit big, closer. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to clarify one thing. Ma'am, yesterday you have mentioned, last night when I was reading some of the things I've jotted down, this moment is not going to get any better than it already is. We can accept it.
What? This moment?
Cannot get better than it already is.
Yes.
We can accept it. When I reread it, it almost rang with, an operatic theme in the background. But today I was like, why can't I make this moment better? I can switch on the air conditioning or put on some better music. Is it just pride and full ignorance?
Well, you can make the next moment better, but this moment you can't.
Okay, I just wanted to know that. Thank you.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't make, our situation good if we can, That is totally fine to do that. But what we normally do is we fight with this moment. We are disappointed about this moment, but this is the best we have. then we can improve. How can I make my future better? Of course.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Shall we go to the meditation? Hawa, can you hold your question, or all right, tomorrow? All right. So let's think about the self. Make yourself comfortable. Give yourself a minute or so to let go whatever we spoke about. Empty the mind. And bring the mind to your body, to the present moment. So when we talk about it inherently existing self, that refers to that sense of self that we have, that self, that I, that me, that seems to be completely independent of anything else. As if it exists from its own side. Not being merely designated by the mind. It appears as if it is findable somewhere within our body and mind. Especially when we have a strong emotion, that self can come up in a way as if it has some real existence. You know, that when we look for it, we could find it. So that self, try to either bring that to your mind or to remember that. That self appears especially when we have strong emotions arising in the mind. So you call that I to mind, the self to mind, and then you check, how does it appear to me? And see how it appears to exist from its own side, as if it is an independent entity. And then we can say, if such an inherently existing self did exist, it must exist either within the aggregates, within the body and the mind, as being the body and the mind, or it must be something completely separate from the body and the mind. There are no other possibilities. Right? So when you have that clear, then you say it has to exist. If it exists, it has to exist in the body and the mind or outside of the body and the mind. So then we're going to check, does the inherently existing self exist as being one with the body and the mind. And so if that were true, then the self and the body and the mind should be identical in all ways of appearance and of existence. Right? That is what inherent existence means. It exists in the way it appears. So the self should be one, appearing as one with the aggregates, with the body and the mind, and it should exist as being one with the body and the mind. And so then we think about reasons why that cannot be true. So if we would say that it is one with the body and the mind, then we would have to say, then we need at least two selves, because there are two things. We have a body and a mind. If the self is inherently one with that, there must be at least two selves. Or if you believe that you can divide the body and the mind into many parts, there should be just as many selves as that you have parts. Or you can turn it around and say, no, there is one self. And so then that would mean there must be, the body and mind is the same thing, it's one thing. It's not something different. If the self and the body and the mind were one thing, why do we give them separate names? Why is there what is the reason that I talk about the self and I talk about my body and mind? If they're exactly the same thing, there is no reason to have two different names. If my body and my mind were the same thing as the self, I would not be able to say, this is my body, this is my mind. I would not be able to say, I'm thinking, I'm eating. The fact that we say it is my body, my mind, shows that we perceive that the self and the body and the mind are not inherently existent one. In terms of function, we know that. But in terms of appearance and in terms of how we hold on to it, we somehow hold on to them as being inherently one. If the self and the body and mind were inherently one, the self would die when the body dies. The mind would die when the body dies. And for instance, memories of past lives would not be possible. And we maybe don't have memories ourselves of past lives, but there are many children who, when they're still very young, they have memories of past lives. And we also know that when somebody dies and we cremate the body, we do not think that we cremate the person or we cremate the consciousness. We say, I can see that the person has gone. It is now an empty body. We say that, we know that. But when the self arises in the mind, it seems to be inherently one with our body and our mind. So by going through these reasons, you say, although I have the appearance and although I have this belief, it doesn't exist like that. So then if the self would be inherently existent, if you feel like, you know, okay, it is not one with the body, then it's maybe different from the body. If the self would be inherently different from the body, then you would be able to see the self. You would be able to think about the self without seeing or thinking about the body and the mind. And so check if that's possible. And then when you think of a person, when you think of the self, you know, always body or mind appears to the mind. Because the self is imputed independence on the body and the mind. So therefore, when we think self, body and mind appears first. Which means that the self is not inherently different from the body and the mind. And so we started this meditation by saying, if it exists inherently, it must exist like this or like that. And with reasonings, we have refuted both options. So then try to come to the conclusion, you know, the way the self appears to me, the way I hold on to the self, it cannot exist like that. It does not exist like that. The self is empty of existing like that. That self that appears to our mind, that inherently existent self, is a non-existent. It doesn't exist at all like that. That is totally made up by the mind. That doesn't mean that you don't exist. You do exist. You have a body, you have a mind. You can think, you can laugh. But that self that we identify so strongly with, that arises in the mind, that appears to us, that self doesn't exist at all like that. Letting go of that self creates so much freedom in the mind. That self is the one that creates all our problems. That self appears to be our biggest friend, always there for us, helping us to get what we need, helping us to be separated from what we don't like. But in actuality, that self is a total fantasy of the mind, and it's only creating suffering. And if you get to a kind of an insight, try to focus on that single-pointedly. And if you feel the need, sometimes this can evoke emotions doing this kind of meditation and reflection. Write them down after the meditation and bring them back tomorrow. And then with whatever insights you got today, bring your meditation to a conclusion. And then we can dedicate the merits that we have created by thinking that all the merit created by generating a positive motivation for doing this session, for doing this meditation, may any living being, just by seeing, hearing, touching, remembering, or talking about me, immediately is freed from all obstacles to happiness, from all disease, from all spirit harm, from all negative actions and aspirations, and quickly achieve the highest happiness of full enlightenment. And then I want to thank you very much for being here today. Have a good continuation of your day, and I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. And on Friday, I thought somebody brought up connection, and I think it was B who said, tell something about connection, right? I thought I'd tell something about connection. I'll talk about connection and disconnection and what it means on the different levels, and in relation to connecting to the nature of our mind. Is that all right? Okay. Thank you very much. And Pema, can you send me the last questions? I haven't read them.
Sure, Vanu. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. See you
Thank you,
tomorrow.
everyone. Thank you, Vanu.
Bye.
Bye-bye.